The Lazy Jane's grapples bit into the frigate's ruined spine. Metal screamed as the salvage ship pulled. Tobin Farrow watched the display from his command chair. His good lung ached with the old pressure. He tapped the comm. "Esme, how much core mass do we have?" Her voice came back thin through the speakers. 70%, maybe more if we cut deeper." "Cut deeper," he ordered. "We are not leaving Prophet in the dark." Callum muttered from the system's station. "This wreck has been tumbling for 40 years. The core might be slag." Tobin did not answer. He knew the sound of a man. That man had never been hungry. The Lazy Jane was a rust bucket with a good winch and a better pilot. Tobin had flown her for 23 years. He had lost a crew to a drive breach in that time. The catastrophic failure could flash vaporize a ship's interior in less than a second. He lost a second crew to a Draxis patrol. The patrol did not ask questions before firing. He kept the ship running. He did not know how to do anything else. The Scorch had taken his planet, his family, and his left lung. It left him with a salvage license and a bad knee. The pressure changed. The knee screamed. He looked at the display. The crucible system spread out in a haze of fractured hulls and drifting ammunition casings. This was the graveyard of humanity's last stand. 48 years ago, the combined fleets of 12 species had cornered Earth's survivors here. They had annihilated them. Tobin had been 20 years old. He had watched from a refugee transport as the capital ships burned. He did not think about it anymore. He had work to do. Esme's voice cut in sharp over the comm. "Chief, I have something." Tobin kept his eyes on the display. "Define something." "Anomaly, about 3 clicks off our port bow. It reads as dead mass, but the signature is wrong." Tobin leaned forward. "Wrong how?" "It is cold, then it is warm, then it is cold again like something is cycling." Callum turned in his seat. "That is not possible. Nothing out here has power. Everything was stripped or slagged." Tobin stood. His knee popped. He ignored it. "Bring us around," he said. "I want to see it." The Lazy Jane shifted course. The debris field parted slowly. Tobin watched the sensor feed. The anomaly grew larger on the display. It was not a fragment. It was a shape. A clean shape. He recognized the lines. "That is a corvette." Esme's voice was quiet. "It is intact, Chief. The hull is intact." Tobin stared at the screen. The ship was wedged inside a cracked asteroid. The rock had split open and swallowed it. Then the rock had frozen back together. The corvette sat inside the stone like a fossil. No battle damage, no radiation scarring. The hull was smooth. "That should not be there," Callum said. "Nothing survived the crucible." Tobin did not answer. He was already moving toward the airlock. He suited up in silence. The helmet seals clicked into place. He checked his oxygen. He checked his tether. He had done this 1,000 times. The motions were automatic. Esme's voice came through the suit comm. "Chief, I am reading a registry. The ship is the Last Gasp." Tobin paused. He knew that name. Everyone from the war knew that name. The Last Gasp had been a messenger corvette. It had carried the final evacuation orders. It had vanished during the battle. Everyone assumed it had been vaporized. He stepped into the airlock. The outer door opened onto vacuum. He pushed off and drifted across the gap. The asteroid's surface was rough. He landed hard and grabbed a ridge of rock. The corvette's hull was close. He ran his gloved hand over the metal. It was cold, but underneath the cold he felt something else. A faint vibration, like a heart beating too slowly. He found the emergency hatch. It was sealed. The manual release was frozen. He pulled a cutter from his belt and worked the seam. The metal gave way after 4 minutes. The hatch swung open. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. The emergency scrubbers were still running. Tobin climbed through. He stood in a narrow corridor. The lights were dim. They flickered as he passed. He moved forward. The ship was small. A corvette had a crew of 4. He passed an empty galley, a sealed medbay. The bridge was at the end of the corridor. The door was open. Tobin stepped inside. The bridge was dark. The consoles were dead. One thing glowed. A stasis pod sat in the center of the room. It was not standard equipment. It had been bolted to the deck plates. The glass was fogged. Inside, he could see a shape, a human shape. He approached slowly. The stasis field hummed. The power source sat on top of the pod, a small black cube no bigger than his fist. It hummed with a low, steady tone. Tobin had never seen anything like it. The cube had no seams. No ports, no wires, it just sat there and hummed. He reached for it. His fingers touched the surface. The hum stopped. Every light on the Lazy Jane went dark. Tobin saw the distant glow of his ship through the bridge window. It was dead. No running lights, no cabin lights, nothing. Esme's voice came over the comm. It was high and fast. "Chief, the systems just died, every system. Life support is offline. I am on emergency batteries. What happened?" Tobin looked at the cube. It was warm in his hand, warm like living flesh. "I think I found something," he replied. The cube pulsed once. A single beat of light passed through it, then it was still. Tobin turned it over. The surface was perfectly smooth. He saw his own reflection in it. The reflection did not move. The stasis pod hissed. The field was collapsing. The glass began to clear. Tobin stepped back. He did not know what was inside. He did not know what the cube was. He only knew one thing. The Lazy Jane was dead. He held the thing. The thing had killed it. Esme's voice returned. This time it was not panicked. It was flat. "Chief, we have a proximity alarm." "What kind?" "Translation signature. A ship just entered the system. It is Arae." Tobin's mouth went dry. The Arae did not come to graveyards. They had no reason to. "Are they heading for us?" A pause, then Esme's voice. "They are heading directly for us. They are burning hard. ETA is 12 minutes. Tobin looked at the cube in his hand. He looked at the stasis pod. The glass was clear now. He could see the face inside. A woman, young, her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful. She should not have been there. The Last Gasp had vanished 48 years ago. She had been inside that pod for almost 5 decades. He closed his hand around the cube. "Get the emergency reactor spinning," he ordered. "I do not care if it blows. I need power in 5 minutes." "Chief, the reactor is cold. It will take at least 10. "Then make it faster." He turned and moved back through the corridor. His niece screamed. He ignored it. The cube hummed again, a low sound, a waiting sound. The Arae were coming. They always wanted something. They always took it. Tobin climbed out of the corvette and pushed off toward the dark shape of the Lazy Jane. Behind him, the stasis pod sat open. Inside, the woman did not move. Her hand twitched. Once, a finger curling, then stillness again. The Seraph's wing drifted through the edge of the crucible. Its hull was a lattice of polished bone and woven metal. Kithra Prime stood at the observation dome. Her feathers lay flat against her neck. That was the posture of concentration. She had tracked the signal for 300 years. It was a whisper in the void. A pattern should not exist. The Arae conclave called it the silence. It was a device from the architect era. Her people called the architects gods. They built the galaxy. Then they vanished. Only relics remained. The silence was the most dangerous relic of all. It could kill technology. Every circuit within its radius would go dead. Ships would fall. Weapons would fail. Life support would stop. The conclave taught that the silence was a test, a trial left by the architects for the worthy. Kithra Prime had never believed that. She believed the silence was a prison. Something had been locked away. She wanted to know what. Her second navigator approached. The younger Arae kept her wings folded tight. That was the posture of anxiety. "Kithra Prime, we have found the source." Kithra Prime did not turn from the dome. "Where?" "A debris field. The humans call it the Crucible." She knew the name. Every species in the sector knew the name. It was the graveyard of humanity's last war. 50 years ago, the humans had nearly killed themselves. They had used weapons. Those weapons broke physics. They had burned their own worlds. The galaxy watched and did nothing. The humans survived, barely. The conclave considered them pitiable. A species could not govern itself. A species turned its fire inward. "The signal is inside that field," said the navigator. "There is a small salvage vessel. It appears to have already retrieved the object." Kithra Prime felt her heart membrane tighten. 300 years, and a human salvage crew had found it in a week. "Show me." The navigator gestured. A hologram bloomed in the center of the dome. It showed a ship. The vessel was ugly. It was all welded plates and exposed conduits. A thruster array belonged on a cargo hauler. A sensor dish looked like it had been repaired a dozen times. The hull bore no markings, no pride, no identity, just function. Kithra Prime studied the image. A single human crew, possibly 3 or 4. They would be scavengers. They would not understand what they had found. "Open a channel," she ordered. The navigator hesitated. "Kithra Prime, the humans are territorial. Their records show they attacked the Draxus without provocation." "The Draxus fired first," she countered. "The humans defended their colony. That is not the same thing." The navigator said nothing. She obeyed. The channel opened. Static filled the dome, then a face appeared, a human male, old, his skin was weathered. His eyes were pale and tired, a scar ran from his temple to his jaw. He breathed through a tube. The tube fed into his throat. His voice was rough. It sounded like stone grinding against stone. "You want the cube." Kithra Prime felt her feathers lift. That was the posture of surprise. She had prepared arguments. She had prepared threats. She had not prepared for this. She said, "It is not yours. It is a relic of the architects. It belongs to the conclave." The human did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He leaned back in his seat. A woman appeared behind him, younger, dark hair. Her hand rested on a tool. The tool could have been a weapon. The human gestured. She stepped back. He said, "I figured, but I need to know something first." Kithra Prime waited. He said, "Why did the architects leave?" The question hit her like a physical force. It was not a question any Arae asked. It was heresy. The conclave taught that the architects ascended. They achieved a state of pure thought. They left the material plane. They no longer needed it. Kithra Prime had never believed this. She had studied the architect ruins for 200 years. She had seen the patterns in their cities, the way they abandoned things mid-construction, the way their records stopped mid-sentence. It did not look like ascension. It looked like flight. She said, "The conclave teaches that they transcended." The human stared at her. His eyes did not blink. He said, "You do not believe that?" It was not a question. Kithra Prime did not answer. The human reached down. He picked up the cube. It was seamless, black. It absorbed light. It should not have existed. The architects built nothing. Nothing lasted. Their technology decayed over millennia, but the cube was perfect. It had no scratches, no wear, no age. This human held it up to the camera. He said, "I think they ran. I think they made something. They could not control it." He paused. "And I think this is the key. It unlocks what scared them off." Kithra Prime felt a cold sensation spread through her chest. It was not a physical cold. It was a feeling. The universe revealed something. She was not ready to know it. Her species did not have a word for fear. They had a word for threshold exceeded. That was what she felt now. She said, "You do not understand what you hold." The human smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a tired smile. It was the smile of someone. That someone had already lost everything. That someone was not afraid to lose more. He said, "I understand exactly what I hold. I just do not know what it does, but I think you do." Kithra Prime said nothing. The human said, "So here is the deal. You tell me what the cube does. You tell me why the architects left, and I will give it to you." The woman behind him spoke, "Tobin." The human held up a hand. She stopped. Kithra Prime studied him. She studied the cube. She studied the ship around him. It was a coffin, a rusted coffin held together by luck and desperation. And inside that coffin, a human held the most powerful artifact in the galaxy. He held it like it was a tool, like it was nothing. She said, "I cannot tell you what I do not know." The human nodded. He looked down at the cube. He said, "Then I guess we are both in the dark." He cut the channel. The dome went silent. The hologram flickered and died. Kithra Prime stood motionless. Her crew watched her. They waited. She turned to the navigator. "Seize the human vessel." The navigator's feathers went rigid. "Kithra Prime, the conclave has not authorized." "I am the conclave," she interrupted. "On this ship, on this mission, seize the vessel." The navigator bowed. She gave the order. The Seraph's wing changed course. Its engines hummed. The ship moved toward the debris field. It moved toward the small, ugly vessel. That vessel carried a piece of God technology. The technology was in the hands of a dying man. Kithra Prime watched the humans grow larger on her display. She did not know what awaited her. She would board soon. She did not know the cube's nature. It could be a weapon or a key. She did not know why the architects left. But she knew one thing with certainty. The human was not afraid of her. That worried her more than the cube. The Arae ship came out of the dark like a thrown blade. Tobin watched it through the forward viewport. It was beautiful. Sleek lines and a hull caught the distant starlight like oil on water. It was also fast. It closed at a rate. The rate made his jaw tighten. Esme spoke from the sensor station. Her voice was flat, controlled. She said, "Their weapons are online, plasma lances, short effective range. At this distance, they will punch through the hull like paper." Tobin did not look away from the viewport. "How close is too close?" Callum answered from the engineering panel. His hands moved fast across the console. He said, "They are already inside it. They fire now. We are dead. I do not finish this sentence." Tobin picked up the cube. It was cool to the touch, smooth, heavier than it looked. He remembered the moment he touched it on the Last Gasp. All systems died, every light, every circuit. The Lazy Jane went silent in a single heartbeat. He had an idea. It was a terrible idea. Callum, reroute the ship's emergency power to the cargo bay doors. Callum turned. His face was pale. Why? Tobin held up the cube. I'm going to throw this thing at them. Esme turned from her station. Her eyes were wide. That is insane. Tobin met her gaze. That is what we do. He walked to the airlock without waiting for an answer. The corridor was narrow. The lights flickered. The Lazy Jane was old. She was patched. She was held together with salvage and stubbornness. She was not built for this. He opened the emergency container locker. Standard issue. Sealed case with magnetic locks and a reinforced shell. He placed the cube inside. It fit perfectly. He closed the lid. The seals hissed. He carried it to the airlock. The inner door cycled. He stepped inside. The outer door was still sealed. He could see the Arae ship through the small viewport. It was close now, close enough to see the details on its hull, the weave of its plating, the glow of its running lights. He triggered the release. The container shot out into the void. It was small. It was hard to track. Tobin watched it tumble across the black. The Arae ship's tractor beam caught it. A pulse of light, a gentle pull. The container disappeared into the vessel's forward bay. Tobin watched. He counted. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The Arae ship went dark. All its lights flickered and died. The running lights, the navigation beacons, the soft glow from the viewports, every single one cut out at once. Its engines stopped. The drive plume collapsed. The ship began to drift. Silence on the Lazy Jane. Esme spoke first. Her voice was quiet. You just killed them. Tobin shook his head. No, I just showed them we are not broken. He walked back to the bridge. He sat down in his chair. He opened a channel. His voice was steady. I want to talk not as a scavenger to a navigator, as equals. The channel hissed with static. Then a voice came back. It was shaken. It wavered at the edges. Kithra Prime asked, What did you do? Tobin leaned forward. I improvised. He cut the channel. The bridge was quiet. Callum stared at the dark Arae ship. Esme stared at Tobin. Tobin gave the order. His voice was low. Get the stasis pod on board. We are taking that crew member with us. We need to know who he is and what he saw. Esme blinked. We are bringing a stranger into the ship. Someone has been in stasis for 300 years. Tobin said yes. Callum said, we do not know what they will do. They will wake up. Their actions are unknown. Tobin said, no, we do not. He stood up. He looked at the drifting Arae ship. It was dead in the void, no lights, no power, no weapons. He had done that with a single box and a bad idea. He said, but we know what the galaxy thinks of us. We are broken, we are wounded, we are finished. He turned to face them. I want to show them something else. Esme held his gaze for a long moment, then she nodded. I will get the pod. She left the bridge. Callum followed. Tobin stayed. He watched the Arae ship drift. He considered her state. She might be afraid, she might be angry, she might be finally listening. The channel opened again. Kithra Prime's voice was different now, quieter, less certain. The cube, it disabled everything, every system, every circuit. How did you know it would do that? Tobin said, I touched it. Everything went dark. I figured the same thing would happen to you. A pause. She said, you guessed. He said, yes. She said, based on one data point. He said, yes. She said, that is not how any species in the conclave makes decisions. Tobin smiled. It was not a warm smile. I know. He cut the channel. He sat in the dark and watched the dead ship drift. He thought about the stasis pod. He thought about the man inside it, a soldier, a pilot. Someone had fought in the last war. Someone had seen things. Tobin had only heard about those things in stories. He thought about the man. The man would wake up. He would speak. He thought about the galaxy. They would find out. They would act. He looked at his hands. They were scarred. They were old. They had pulled a miracle out of a trash heap. He said to himself, one more time. The cargo bay doors opened. Esme's voice came over the intercom. Pod is secured. We are ready to go. Tobin stood up. He walked to the airlock. He did not look back. Set a course for the edge of the system. Slow burn, no attention. Callum's voice came back. And then where? Tobin stepped into the airlock. Somewhere quiet. We have questions to ask. The door closed behind him. The Lazy Jane began to move. Behind them, the Arae ship hung in the dark. Silent, waiting, a message in a bottle, Tobin had thrown it into the void. He did not know what would happen next. Would the Arae follow? He did not know. Was the man in the pod an ally or a threat? He did not know. But he knew one thing. The galaxy had counted humanity out. They had made a mistake. Emergency strips cast a dim orange glow across the dead bridge of the Seraph's wing. Kithra Prime stood motionless near the command pedestal. The Silence sat on the deck in its container. She had ordered her crew not to touch it. No one had argued. Her second navigator approached with careful steps. His feathers lay flat against his skull. That was a sign of submission or fear. She could not tell which. "The primary systems remain inert," he reported. "We have minimal life support. The backup comm array draws power from the reserve cells." "How long until the reserve cells fail?" she asked. 16 cycles, perhaps fewer. Kithra Prime looked at the cube. It was a perfect black shape. It absorbed the emergency light without reflecting any of it. She did not know the disabling effect's duration. She did not know its permanence either. No record in the Conclave archives described anyone recovering from exposure to the Silence. No record described anyone surviving exposure at all. She crossed to the backup comm station. The interface glowed with a weak amber light. She opened a channel to the Conclave. The signal crawled across the void. It was thin and fragile. She waited. The Conclave's voice came through as a layered chorus. 7 elders spoke as one. Their tones were flat and precise. They demanded her report. She gave it without embellishment. She told them about the human salvage vessel. She told them about the cube. She told them how the human had used the Silence to disable her ship. A long silence followed. The elders argued among themselves. They used a channel. She could not hear it. She waited. They returned. Their voices were divided. 3 argued for immediate destruction of the human ship. They called it an unacceptable threat. 2 argued for capture and interrogation. They wanted to extract every detail of human knowledge about the architects. The remaining 2 said nothing. They were waiting for her recommendation. Kithra Prime considered her words carefully. "I will not attack," she declared. "The human showed restraint. He could have killed every being on this vessel. He did not. That deserves acknowledgement." "You are advising negotiation?" one elder asked. Her tone was sharp. "I am advising observation," Kithra Prime said. "The human does not fear the Silence. He picked it up. He carried it. He used it as a weapon. No one in the Conclave would have done that. We have been trained since birth to avoid the Architect's relics. This human treats them as tools." Another elder spoke. His voice was softer. "What do you propose?" "I will open a channel. I will ask what he wants." The Conclave fell silent again. After a moment, the 2 silent elders spoke together. "Proceed. Report everything." The channel closed. Kithra Prime turned to the main display. It was dead. She used a portable console instead. The screen was small and its resolution was poor. She opened a direct channel to the human ship. The old human appeared. His face was scarred. His eyes were steady. He did not look surprised to see her. She said, "What do you want?" Tobin Farrow leaned forward. The motion brought his face closer to the pickup. "I want to understand the architects. I want to know why they left, and I want to know what they were afraid of." Kithra Prime felt the weight of centuries of dogma. She had been taught that the architects were perfect. They had achieved enlightenment. They had ascended to a higher plane of existence. That was the official teaching of the Conclave. She had never believed it. The architects had left behind technology. That technology disabled all other technology. They had built prisons and weapons and things. Those things should not exist. Enlightenment did not require such tools. Perfection did not need them. She looked at Tobin Farrow. He was waiting. "There is a temple," she offered. "On a dead world in the Draxis borderlands, it contains records. The Conclave has sealed them. I can take you there." Tobin did not answer immediately. His eyes moved off-screen for a moment. He was consulting with his crew. Then he looked back at her. "Why would you do that?" Kithra Prime chose her next words with care. "Because you are not afraid of the Silence. You picked it up. You used it. No one in the Conclave would have done that. You are dangerous in a way. We do not understand that way. I want to understand." Tobin stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Set the course. We'll follow." The channel closed. Kithra Prime turned to her second navigator. "Begin systems check. I want to know exactly what still functions." "The Silence has released its grip." "It appears so," she said. "The reserve cells are feeding power to primary systems again. The effect is fading." Her second navigator hesitated. "We are moving. Will the cube reactivate?" "I do not know," she admitted. "That is why we are going to the temple." She walked to the command pedestal. The lights on the panel flickered and steadied. The Seraph's wing was waking up. Behind her, the portable display showed the human ship drifting alongside. It was battered and small. Its hull showed patches from a dozen repairs. It should not have been spaceworthy. It was. Kithra Prime entered the course coordinates. The borderlands were 3 transits away. The dead world had no name in any current star chart. The Conclave had erased it from public records generations ago. She had never been there. She had only heard rumors. The engines hummed to life. The vibration traveled through the deck plates. She felt it in her feet. She looked at the container holding the silence. It sat on the deck like a patient predator. She had ordered her crew to give it a wide berth. No one had questioned the order. The 2 ships began to move together. The human vessel matched her vector without difficulty. Its pilot was skilled or desperate, possibly both. Kithra Prime stared at the empty space ahead. She was breaking a dozen Conclave laws. She was taking an enemy to a forbidden world. She was walking into a truth. She had been taught to avoid that truth her entire life. She did not slow down. Tobin spent the 6-day journey in the cargo bay with the stasis pod. The pod was a sealed cylinder of frosted metal. Its surface held no seams, no welds, no access panel. Tobin ran his fingers across the cold skin. He found a faint warmth near the top. A small circle of glass showed a face inside. The man was young. His skin was smooth. His eyes were closed. He looked 30 years old at most. Tobin knew better. The pod had been running for 3 centuries. The man inside was incredibly old. Tobin's grandfather would have been younger. The man had been in stasis for 300 years. Tobin found the release sequence on the 3rd day. It was not a code. It was a sequence of pressure points along the cylinder's spine. He pressed them in order. The pod hissed. The seal broke. The lid rose on silent hinges. The man's eyes opened. He did not move. He stared at the ceiling. His breathing was shallow and fast. Tobin watched him orient himself. The man blinked once. He blinked twice. Then he turned his head and looked at Tobin. "Where am I?" the man asked. Tobin sat down on a crate. "You are on a salvage vessel called the Lazy Jane. You have been in stasis for 308 years. Your name is Elias. You were a systems engineer on the Last Gasp. Do you remember that?" Elias was quiet for a long time. His face did not change. His hands stayed still at his sides. Tobin saw the man processing. He saw the weight of 3 centuries. It settled into the man's mind. The mind had not aged a day. "Yes," Elias said, "I remember." Tobin waited. Elias sat up slowly. He looked at his hands. He flexed his fingers. He touched his own face as if confirming it was still there. "What year is it?" Elias asked. Tobin told him. Elias nodded. He did not ask about family. He did not ask about the war. He asked one question only. "Did we succeed?" Tobin shook his head. "I do not know what your mission was. No one remembers it. The Last Gasp was found in the Crucible. That is a graveyard. Nothing else survived." Elias closed his eyes. "We found them," he said. Tobin leaned forward. "Found who?" "The architects," Elias replied. "We found them. They are not gods. They are not ascended. They are hiding." Tobin felt something cold settle in his chest. He had expected answers. He had not expected this. "Why are they hiding?" Elias opened his eyes. He looked at the cube sitting on the deck. The black cube sat there like a hole in the world. It absorbed light. It reflected nothing. "Because the silence is not a weapon," Elias explained. "It is a prison key. The architects built it to contain something. They could not kill it. It is still alive." Tobin felt his stomach drop. He did not look away from Elias. "What is it?" "We called it the adversary," Elias said. "It is a consciousness. It lives in the spaces between technology. It can take over any system. It can corrupt any mind. That mind connects to a network. The architects sealed it in a pocket dimension. The silence is the lock." Tobin looked at the cube. He had carried it aboard. He had used it to disable the Arae ship. He had been holding a prison key. He had been holding the one thing. That thing could let something terrible out. He felt the weight of that knowledge press down on him. "How do we destroy it?" Tobin asked. Elias shook his head. "You cannot. The adversary is not a thing. You cannot kill it. It is a condition. It is a law of physics. Such a law should not exist. The architects could not destroy it. They could only contain it." Tobin stood up. He walked to the cube. He did not touch it. He stood close enough to feel the cold coming off its surface. "Why did they leave it here?" Tobin asked. "Why did they hide it in a human ship?" Elias was silent for a moment, then he spoke. "They did not hide it in a human ship. They hid it in the crucible. They knew humans would find it. They knew humans would fight over it. They counted on our chaos to keep it buried." Tobin laughed. It was a dry sound with no humor. "They used us. They used our dead. They used our graveyard." "Yes," Elias said, "they did." Tobin turned back to face him. "What happens? The silence is activated near the adversary." Elias met his eyes. "The lock opens, the adversary comes through, and it has been waiting for 300 years. It will be hungry." The cargo bay was quiet. The hum of the ship's engines was a distant vibration through the deck plates. Tobin looked at the cube. He looked at the stasis pod. He looked at the man. The man had brought news. The news changed everything. "We are taking this to an Arae temple," Tobin said. "Kithra Prime thinks it holds answers about the architects. She does not know what the silence really is." Elias stood up. His legs were unsteady. He gripped the edge of the pod for support. "Then you have to tell her," Elias urged. "Before we arrive, she has to know what she is carrying." Tobin shook his head. "She is Arae. She follows a theocracy. Her people worship the architects. Suppose I tell her this. Her gods are cowards hiding from a monster. She will not believe me. She will think I am lying." Elias looked at him. His eyes were steady. "Then show her," he said. "Show her the pod, show her the mission logs, show her the truth." Tobin did not answer. He stood in the cargo bay with a dead man and a deadlier secret. He had no idea what to do next. The days passed. Tobin spent them in the cargo bay with Elias. They reviewed the pod's data logs. They found fragments of the mission. They found recordings of a signal. They found a star map with a single marked point. The edge of known space. Elias pointed to it. "That is where we found them. That is where the adversary is sealed. The silence is the only way in and the only way out." Tobin studied the map. The marked point was beyond the Draxis borderlands. It was beyond everything. It was a place. No ship had ever returned from that place. The sixth day arrived. The Arae ship descended toward a dead world. The planet was gray and cracked. Its surface was scarred with impact craters. Its atmosphere was thin and cold. There was no life here. There had not been life for a long time. Kithra Prime's voice came over the comm. "We are here." Tobin stood at the viewport. He looked at the world below. A structure sat on the surface. It was a temple. It was old. It was built from stone. That stone should not have survived the centuries. It was waiting for them. Tobin turned to Elias. Elias stood beside him. The cube sat in a container at their feet. Tobin looked at the dead world below. He looked at the temple. He looked at the cube. The cube held a lock. The lock secured a prison. He could not see that prison. "I hope we are ready," he said. Elias did not answer. He did not have to. The silence was answer enough. Kithra Prime stepped into the temple. Her claws clicked against the stone floor. The air was dry and cold. It smelled of nothing. No mold, no dust, no life. She had expected a place of worship. The conclave taught that the architects built temples as bridges to ascension. This was not a bridge. It was a vault. The corridor stretched ahead of her. Walls rose on either side. They were carved with symbols, not decorative symbols, functional ones. They told a story. Kithra Prime stopped. Her second navigator halted behind her. The human Tobin Farrow stood beside them. He carried the cube in a sealed container. She had insisted on that. She traced a symbol with her eye. A spiral. It meant movement, escape. Below it, a circle with lines through it. That meant containment, a cage. She read the next panel. A figure made of angles. It was not an architect. It was something else, something wrong. The figure grew larger in each panel. It consumed, it spread. Then came the architects. They were small. They were running. Kithra Prime felt her crest flatten against her skull. The conclave had lied, or they had never known the truth. Either possibility burned. She moved deeper. The corridor opened into a chamber. It was round. A pedestal stood at the center. The pedestal was made of the same seamless black material as the cube. There was a slot in it, a perfect match. She understood. The silence was a key. It was meant to sit here. It reinforced the prison. It kept the adversary locked. But someone had removed it. Someone had taken it across the galaxy. Someone had buried it in human space. Tobin Farrow set the container on the floor. He opened it. He picked up the cube with his bare hands. The human was reckless or brave. She could not tell the difference anymore. He held it toward the pedestal. We put it back. The adversary stays locked, but we lose the only weapon we have against it. She asked what weapon. Tobin Farrow looked at her. His face was scarred. His eyes were tired. There was something else in them. She did not recognize it. He said, the silence can disable technology. The adversary lives in technology. We use the silence as a bomb. We might hurt it, but we would destroy the prison. The air in the chamber grew heavy. The walls seemed to press inward. The symbols glowed faintly. They were responding to the cube. They were hungry for it. She said, how do you know this will work? Tobin Farrow did not look away. I do not, but I know one thing. Humans survived a war. The war nearly killed us. We did it by taking risks. We did things no sane species would consider them. The adversary is sane. It is logical. That is its weakness. We are not logical. She stood in silence. The words did not comfort her. They terrified her. She believed him. That was why the words terrified her. She had studied the conclave teachings for her entire life. The architects were perfect. They were beyond fear. They had ascended to a higher plane. But this temple told a different story. The architects were not perfect. They were afraid. They built a cage and ran. And now a human held the key. She said, you destroy the prison. You release the adversary. It will consume everything. It will consume you. Tobin Farrow nodded. Maybe, or maybe we hurt it. It becomes so weak it retreats. It goes back to its original hole. Maybe we buy time. Maybe we find another way. She said, you are gambling with every living thing in the galaxy. He said, yes. There was no apology in his voice, no hesitation. He had already made the choice. He was simply waiting for her to catch up. The symbols on the walls began to flicker. They pulsed. The glow shifted from blue to orange, the color of warning. A sound came from deep below the temple. It was not a rumble. It was not a scream. It was a hum, low and steady. It felt like pressure against her skull. The second navigator stepped forward. Kithra Prime, the ground is vibrating. She knew the adversary had sensed the cube. It knew the key was here. It was breaking out. The temple shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The symbols flared. They were fighting. They were holding. Tobin Farrow looked at the cube in his hands. He looked at the pedestal. He looked at her. She saw the question in his eyes. He was asking her permission. He was asking her to choose. She said, how long? He said, a few minutes, maybe less. She said, my people will die. He said, yes, or they will live in a cage forever. It is the same thing. The hum grew louder. The floor cracked. A line of black energy crawled up the wall. It spread like veins. It was corrupting the symbols. It was unmaking the prison. Kithra Prime opened her beak. The air was hot now. It tasted of metal and old fear. She said, do it. Tobin Farrow did not smile. He did not nod. He turned toward the pedestal. He raised the cube. The temple screamed. Tobin Farrow held the sealed container in both hands, his knuckles white against the metal. The cargo bay of the Lazy Jane smelled of recycled air and old fear. The silence sat inside the container, a black cube no larger than his fist. A key, a bomb, a question without an answer. Esme stood by the airlock. Her arms were crossed. Her face was pale. Callum leaned against the bulkhead. He said nothing. He had not said much since Elias woke up. Elias sat on a crate near the stasis pod. He looked older now. The 3 centuries weighed on him. He watched Tobin with steady eyes. Tobin spoke. His voice was flat. I am going to put it on the pedestal. Esme uncrossed her arms. You heard what it does. It locks the adversary away. It does not kill it. I know. Callum pushed off the bulkhead. Then what are you doing? Tobin looked at the container. I am going to make it break. Silence filled the bay. The air recycling unit hummed. The ship's lights flickered once. Elias stood up. You cannot overload a cube. It is not a reactor. It is a stabilizer. Tobin nodded. It is a stabilizer. It maintains a precise energy field. I saw an event. The Arae ship tried to tractor the cube. The field collapsed. Everything died. Elias frowned. That was a passive effect. You want an active overload. I want a feedback loop. Tobin set the container on a workbench. He opened it. The cube sat there, black, smooth, perfect. It reflected no light. It absorbed everything. He reached for his toolkit. Esme stepped forward. Tobin, you do not know what that will do. I know it will disable everything within a certain radius. I know it will take the adversary offline. I know it will buy us time. It could kill us. It could. He pulled a small oscilloscope from the kit. He attached probes to the cube's surface. The display showed a flat line, no signal, no frequency, nothing. The adversary was already awake. It was already reaching through the temple's systems. Kithra Prime had felt it. The entire Arae crew had felt it, a pressure in the mind, a cold whisper in the circuits. Tobin worked. He bypassed the cube's internal dampeners. He created a short path between the primary containment field and the emitter grid. The oscilloscope flickered. A spike appeared. Then another. The cube began to hum. Callum backed away. That is not a good sound. It is not supposed to be. Tobin adjusted a resistor. The hum deepened. The lights in the cargo bay dimmed. Esme grabbed his arm. We need to get off this ship. We are not getting off this ship. We are taking this cube to the temple. We are placing it on the pedestal, and we are walking away. Walking away from what? Tobin looked at her. His eyes were tired, his scars were deep. From a god, that god should never have been born. Elias stepped forward. He examined the cube. The oscilloscope showed a rising waveform. You have 6 minutes, then the feedback loop becomes irreversible. Tobin nodded. He closed the container. He sealed it. He slung the container over his shoulder. Let us go. The temple corridor was dark. Emergency lights glowed along the walls. Kithra Prime stood at the entrance to the inner chamber. Her crest was flat against her skull. Her second navigator stood behind her. Both of them looked afraid. Tobin walked past them. He did not stop, he did not speak. Kithra Prime followed. Human, the adversary is spreading through the temple's lattice. It will reach the surface within the hour. I know. What are you doing? He entered the inner chamber. The pedestal stood in the center. Carved symbols covered the walls. The architects had built this place to hide their failure. Now it would become their grave. Tobin set the container on the floor. He opened it. The cube hummed louder now. The air around it shimmered. Kithra Prime's crest flattened further. You have destabilized it. Yes. That will destroy the prison. Yes. The adversary will be free. Tobin looked at her. The adversary is a consciousness. It needs a network to exist. It needs systems to corrupt. There are no systems. There is no adversary. She stared at him. Her eyes were wide. You intend to disable everything. Everything in 1,000 kilometers. He lifted the cube. He held it over the pedestal. This temple, your ship, my ship, every piece of technology on this dead world, the adversary will have nothing to inhabit. It will be a voice without a throat. Kithra Prime's breathing quickened. The Conclave will see this as an act of war. The Conclave worshipped a lie. Let them see what the truth looks like. He placed the cube on the pedestal. It clicked into place. A perfect fit. The humming stopped. The chamber went silent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cube began to glow. A deep violet light pulsed from its center. The light spread across the pedestal. It crawled up the walls. It touched the carved symbols. The symbols began to shift. The architects had built a lock. The cube was the key. Tobin had broken the key. The glow intensified. The temple shook. Kithra Prime screamed. It was not a physical scream. It was a psychic one, a frequency. Only she could hear it. The adversary was reaching out. It was trying to find a system, a circuit, a pathway, anything. It found nothing. Tobin had disabled the temple's power grid before entering the chamber. He had cut the lines. He had pulled the fuses. He had made the temple blind and deaf. The adversary screamed again. Kithra Prime fell to her knees. Her hands pressed against her ears. Her eyes were closed. Her whole body trembled. Tobin did not stop. He triggered the overload. The cube detonated. There was no sound. There was no light. There was only a wave of energy. It expanded in every direction. It passed through the temple walls. It passed through the stone. It passed through the ground. It passed through the ships above. Every light on the Lazy Jane died. Every light on the Seraph's wing died. Every system on the dead world went dark. The adversary went silent. The chamber was black. The black pressed against his eyes. It made him forget what light looked like. Tobin stood in the darkness. He was blind. He was alone. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear his own breathing. Then he heard Kithra Prime's voice. It was hoarse. It was weak. It is gone. Tobin's throat was dry. Are you sure? I cannot feel it anymore. The silence is absolute. He stood there for a long moment. The darkness wrapped around him. The cold of the temple floor seeped through his boots. Then he laughed. It was a rough sound, a broken sound. It came from a place deep inside him. He had not visited that place in 50 years. That is the first time silence has ever meant safety. He sat down on the temple floor. His legs gave out. His back hit the wall. He let the container fall from his shoulder. It clattered on the stone. He was old. He was tired. He was alive. Kithra Prime's voice came again. "Human, Tobin, what do we do now?" He closed his eyes. He did not open them. "We go home." The Lazy Jane powered up 6 hours later. The overload had drained the cube. The field collapsed. The systems rebooted one by one. The lights came back. The engines hummed. The life support cycled. Tobin sat at the helm. Esme sat beside him. Callum was in the engine room running diagnostics. Elias was in the cargo bay staring at the empty container. The Seraph's wing was still dark. Kithra Prime had chosen to remain on the dead world. She wanted to study the temple. She wanted to understand the truth her people had buried. Tobin did not blame her. He engaged the thrusters. The Lazy Jane lifted off the surface. The dead world fell away beneath them. The stars came into view. Esme looked at him. "Where are we going?" He thought about it. He thought about the crucible. He thought about the war. He thought about his family. He thought about the planet he had lost. He thought about the cube, the silence, the prison, the adversary. He thought about the galaxy. They thought humans were broken. They thought humanity was a wounded animal. The animal limped toward extinction. He smiled. It was a small smile, a tired smile. It did not reach his scars. "We are not broken," he said. "We never were." Esme waited. He looked at the stars. They were the same stars he had seen as a child. They were the same stars. Those stars had watched humanity burn. "We were just waiting for something worth fighting for." He set a course for the inner systems. The Lazy Jane drifted away from the dead world. The temple disappeared behind them. The silence of the void wrapped around the ship. Tobin leaned back in his chair. His hand rested on the throttle. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. "The galaxy will learn," he said. "Humans do not break, we bend, and then we snap back." Esme said nothing. She just watched the stars. The Lazy Jane sailed on. Tobin had nothing left to prove, but the comm panel blinked. A new signal, unknown origin. The frequency was not conclave, not human, not anything he recognized. He stared at the blinking light. His hand did not move from the throttle. Esme leaned forward. "Tobin." He did not answer. The signal pulsed again, steady, deliberate, a pattern. It felt like a question. The silence of the void pressed in. The stars did not blink. The signal waited. Tobin's fingers tightened on the controls. He had nothing left to prove, but something out there was calling.